The world as you know it is a lie, not because of a conspiracy or a cover-up, but because of a collective planetary amnesia. We look at the ruins of Rome or the pyramids of Giza, and we think this is the beginning of the story. We think history is a straight line, a slow, steady climb from the mud to the stars.
But that's not how the ancients remembered it. To them, history wasn't a line, it was a wheel. And that wheel is turned a lot more times than your history books are willing to admit.
Wait, willing to admit makes it sound like a secret kept in a vault. It's not that the truth is hidden, it's that it's written in a language we've forgotten how to speak. You look at the Bronze Age collapse and see a failing economy. I look at it and see the echoes of a recurring nightmare. Every tradition on this planet, from the frozen fjords of the north to the high peaks of the Andes, isn't telling us about a single end of the world. They are giving us a census of how many times the world has already died.
You're talking about the ages of man. The Greeks said there were 5. We are the Iron Age, the cold, hard, final remnant of a much brighter past. They believed we were the dregs of a once golden existence.
See, that's where you and the texts usually stop. You see iron and think primitive, but if you look at it from the perspective of the Vedic traditions, we aren't just primitive, we are spiritually blind. They call it the Kali Yuga. It's not just an age of war, it's an age where the truth becomes invisible. But notice the pattern. Before the Kali Yuga, there was the Dwapara, the Treta, and the Krita, 4 distinct resets.
And the Aztecs would say you're missing one. They didn't count 4, they counted 5 suns, each one a literal apocalypse that wiped the slate clean. One was ended by jaguars, one by wind, one by fire, and one by water. We are living under the 5th sun, the sun of motion, and according to them, our omen isn't fire or flood, it's the earth itself opening up to swallow the motion whole.
It's fascinating how we both see the same ruins but read different warnings. You see a sequence of disasters, I see a recurring great filter. It's like humanity keeps reaching a certain level of noise, a certain level of arrogance, and the universe simply hits the mute button. Whether it's the Hopi speaking of the blue star Kachina or the Norse dreaming of a winter that never ends, the story is always the same. We forgot the omens. We ignored the signs of the previous age, and so we were recycled.
Before we dive into the specific evidence of these resets, the physical scars left on the earth, and the terrifyingly consistent warnings left in our oldest myths, you need to make sure you're here for the full cycle. If you want to uncover the hidden lore of our forgotten ancestors and prepare for what the next turn of the wheel might bring, hit that subscribe button and join us here at Ages and Omens. You don't want to be the one who misses the warning signs this time around.
Because here is the real question. If we are the 5th civilization, or the 7th, or the 9th, where happened to the ones who came before us? Where is their steel? Where is their glass?
Maybe it's not buried in the dirt. Maybe it's buried in our DNA. Maybe mythology isn't a collection of fairy tales, but a survival manual written in code. We think we are the peak of human achievement, but what if we're just the latest crop of survivors, standing on the shoulders of ghosts, waiting for our own sun to set? Let's look at the first reset, the one history says never happened, but the earth says was the loudest scream in human history. Let's talk about the fire that came before the ice.
So, let's go back, way back, before the Great Flood that everyone talks about. Most people think the beginning of our story starts with water, but the ancient traditions say it actually started with fire.
The Hopi call it Tokpela, the first world. And you have to understand, this wasn't some primitive, oog-boog caveman existence. In their tradition, humans lived in a state of total harmony. They could communicate with animals, and they felt a physical vibration in the top of their heads that kept them connected to the planet. It was a golden age of intuition.
But that's where the first omen appeared, and it wasn't a sign in the sky, it was a change in the heart. The lore says people started using their spiritual gifts for selfish reasons. They grew divided. They stopped feeling that vibration and started seeing the earth as something to be owned rather than something to be part of.
And that's when the twin guardians left their posts at the North and South poles. The world began to spin out of control and fire rained down. But look at how the Aztecs described this same era. They called it the sun of the earth, or Nahui Ocelotl. In their version, it didn't end with a rain of fire, it ended with giants being devoured by jaguars.
Now, see, jaguars sounds like a metaphor to the modern ear, but if you look at the geological record, we see these bizarre layers of black mat and impact glass in the soil dating back to these massive transition periods. What the Aztecs called jaguars, something fast, silent, and predatory coming out of the dark, might have been the only way an ancient mind could describe a rain of meteors or a massive solar flare that turned the atmosphere into a furnace.
Exactly. It's a predatory fire. In the Greek tradition, this is the story of Phaethon, the son of the sun god, who lost control of the solar chariot and scorched the earth. Every culture has a memory of the sky turning into a weapon. They all agree on one terrifying detail. The only people who survived were the ones who saw the signs early and hid in the womb of the earth.
You're talking about the deep underground cities like Derinkuya in Turkey. Thousands of people living in sophisticated multi-level tunnels with air shafts and massive stone doors. Why would a primitive people spend decades carving a city into solid rock unless the surface of the planet had become a literal hellscape?
They weren't just hiding from the heat, though. They were waiting. But here's the thing about the reset button. It doesn't just hit once and stop. When those survivors finally crawled out of the ground, hoping to see the green world they remembered, they found something much worse. The Age of Fire was just the opening act for the Age of Ice.
Right, because you can't have a global fire without a global cool down. The soot in the atmosphere blocks the sun, the temperatures plummet, and suddenly the few survivors of the fire are facing a 3-year-long winter that refuses to break. The Norse called it Fimbulwinter, and that's where the story gets really dark. Because when the world freezes, the omens move from the sky into the shadows. Imagine the sky turning from fire red to a dull, suffocating gray. The soot from those global fires doesn't just go away, it chokes the atmosphere, blotting out the sun for years. This is where the earth stops sweating and starts shivering.
And this is where the Norse sagas pick up the thread. They call it Fimbulwinter. 3 years of relentless snow, no summers in between, and a wind that cuts through bone. But most people forget the most terrifying part of that omen. It wasn't just the cold, it was the wolf age. They said that before the world ends in ice, brothers will kill brothers, and all social bonds will snap.
See, I think you're looking at the symptom and calling it the cause. To a historian, brothers killing brothers is just what happens when the food runs out. It's a resource war. But if you look at the Hopi second world, what they call Tokpa, the destruction wasn't just a cold snap. They believe the world literally flipped on its axis. The twin guardians left their posts again, the earth spun out of balance, and it froze into solid ice. It wasn't just a winter, it was a total planetary lockdown.
That's a fair point, but look at the how. Whether it's a physical tilt or a solar dimming, the result was the same. The survivors from the Fire Age who had just crawled out of their caves were forced right back into them. Imagine being a chosen survivor only to realize the world you've inherited is a frozen wasteland. In the second world, the Hopi say humans became beings of the head instead of beings of the heart. They started trading and hoarding, becoming obsessed with what they had rather than what they were.
It's the same omen as the first reset, arrogance. We keep failing the same test. But here's where the story gets really interesting. Every ice age has to end, and it doesn't end quietly.
You're talking about the Great Melt. If you have ice sheets 2 miles thick covering North America and Europe and the temperature suddenly spikes, that water has to go somewhere.
Exactly. People talk about the Great Flood as if it was just a long rainstorm. That's the Sunday school version. But if you look at it through the lens of the resets, the third sun wasn't just a flood, it was a catastrophic high-speed hydraulic surge. The Aztecs called it Nahui Aatl, the sun of water. They said the water came so fast that the mountains themselves disappeared.
But wait, some of the oldest Sumerian texts describe the abyss opening up. It's like the earth itself started sweating.
Or, like the weight of the ice was so heavy it cracked the crust, and the subterranean oceans we are only now rediscovering with modern satellites, erupted upward. This wasn't a boat in the backyard situation, this was the third reset, the one that almost succeeded in erasing us forever.
And if you think the fire and the ice were bad, wait until you hear what the survivors of the flood found waiting for them when the water finally receded. Because the fourth age, that's where the gods decided to get involved personally.
The water didn't just recede, it left behind a world that was a graveyard of giants. Imagine stepping out onto a planet where every landmark you knew was buried under 100 feet of silt and salt. The third reset was so thorough that the survivors weren't just starting from scratch, they were starting with nothing. No seeds, no tools, no history.
But that's where the miracle happens, or the intervention, depending on which omen you're reading. Suddenly, in the blink of an eye, you have the Sumerians, the Egyptians, and the Maya appearing out of nowhere with advanced mathematics, complex irrigation, and a sudden obsession with the stars.
See, you're making it sound like they just found a textbook in the mud, but the texts are very specific. They didn't find it. It was given. The Sumerians called it the kingship descending from heaven. The Maya spoke of the heart of sky. This was the fourth sun, the age of the heroes. This is the era when the line between human and something else became blurry.
And that's exactly what the skeptic in me finds suspicious. You have gods walking among men, teaching them how to stack stones that weigh 80 tons with millimetric precision. But look at the omen for this age. It wasn't about surviving nature anymore. It was about power. This was the age where humans were taught the secrets of the universe, and surprise, surprise, we immediately used them to build empires and monuments to our own greatness.
It's the Babel syndrome. In the Aztec version, the fourth sun was called Nahui-Aatl, but some traditions say this was the age of the wind. They believe the gods saw that humanity had become too powerful, too knowledgeable, and too arrogant. We weren't just living on the earth, we were trying to rule the vibration.
And that's the part that gives me chills. If you look at the fall of this fourth age, it wasn't a slow decline. It was a sudden, violent scattering. Languages were confused, the gods left, the high-tech masonry stopped mid-project. If you go to the quarries at Baalbek or the unfinished obelisks in Egypt, it looks like everyone just dropped their tools and walked away.
Because the omen of the fourth age had been fulfilled. The gods realized that giving us the keys to the kingdom didn't make us divine, it just made us dangerous. So the reset this time wasn't fire or water, it was forgetting. They didn't destroy our bodies, they destroyed our memory. They scattered us across the globe and let the jungle and the desert swallow the evidence of our heroic age.
Which brings us to right now, the fifth sun, the age of motion, or as the Hindu tradition calls it, the Kali Yuga. We've spent the last few thousand years trying to remember what we lost, slowly building back up to the same level of technology and arrogance that got the fourth age unplugged.
But the omens for this age aren't about the gods coming back to save us. Every tradition agrees the fifth reset is the big one. It's the one where the wheel doesn't just turn, it might actually break.
So what is the omen for the sun we are living under right now? And why did the ancients say that the sun of motion would be the shortest age of them all? We need to look at the signs, the ones in the sky and the ones in our own machines.
So here we are, the fifth sun. The Aztecs called it Nahui Olan, the sun of motion. And on paper, we look like we're winning. We've conquered the air, we've split the atom, and we've mapped the human genome. We've rebuilt the Tower of Babel out of fiber optic cables and silicon chips.
But you're ignoring the omen of motion. In the Aztec tradition, this age doesn't end with fire from the sky or water from the deep. It ends when the earth itself decides it can no longer support the motion. They predicted that the fifth sun would be destroyed by massive earthquakes, a literal shaking apart of the foundation.
Earthquakes could be literal, sure, but look at the Hindu perspective on our current age, the Kali Yuga. They don't talk about the ground shaking, they talk about the truth shaking. They say this is the age where greed and wrath take the place of religion, and where the wealthy will be considered the only pure ones. To them, the reset happens because the spiritual weight of humanity becomes too heavy for the world to carry.
Exactly. It's a collapse of the vibration the Hopi talked about in the first world. We've become so loud, so fast, and so disconnected that we can't even hear the warnings anymore. We're staring at our screens, tracking omens in the stock market and the news cycle, while completely ignoring the fact that every previous civilization thought they were too advanced to fail too.
It's a haunting thought. If the pattern holds, if the fire, the ice, the water, and the forgetting were all necessary pruning of the human tree, then what is the purpose of the fifth reset?
Maybe the fifth reset isn't a pruning. Maybe it's the harvest. If you look at the prophecies of the Golden Age returning, they all say the same thing. The end of one cycle is the birth of the next. The omen isn't just a warning of death. It's a labor pain for a new kind of existence.
But that's the catch, isn't it? Only those who recognized the omens survived the previous resets. The ones who stayed in the cities of the first world burned. The ones who stayed in the valleys of the third world drowned.
And the ones who stay asleep in the fifth world, well, they might just become the ghosts that the sixth world wonders about. We look back at the giants and the gods of the past and call them myths. I wonder what the people of the next age will call us.
Probably the age of noise. The people who had all the information in the world but forgot how to read the sky.
So the question isn't if the wheel will turn. The wheel is already moving. The question is, when the motion stops and the earth finally settles into its next shape, will you be a survivor, or will you just be another omen buried in the strata for the next civilization to find?
History isn't a line, it's a circle. And we are very, very close to the point where the beginning meets the end.
Watch the finds, listen to the vibration, because the ages are long, but the omens are brief.
Thanks for walking through the cycles with us. We'll see you in the next age.
Or maybe we'll see you in the shadows of this one.